Up next, we'd like to invite Mr. Andrew Moy, Business Development for Fortinet. He will be covering Simplify Business Security Without Sacrifice. Andrew, please.
Hello. Yep. Thank you guys for still staying alive. My name is Andrew. I come from Fortinet. I think my main my main job is actually to work with companies to see what works. Right? Business development, I think, is about what works for what type of organizations. We all have to live within the bounds of the limitations, personnel, resources, S11, we have mentioned earlier. And I think that is important, especially for SME, because that is that's the clearest limitation that all SMEs actually have, right? Even for some SMEs that I work with, they are rich, right? But the company only is a 10-man business. How many things do they need to buy and maintain themselves, right? So the main thing I do want to touch on, simplicity. And kind of like simplicity, I obviously doesn't want to make it too marketing as a word. Okay, but it is an ideal. It's an ideal that I think it's time that we goes back to revisit this ideal. How much can we move forward to this simplicity concept? Now, I just borrow from CSA, I think it was October last year, that there are some things that they mentioned about 80% of the companies, SMEs, they are already in the route of digitization, right? The digital journey has already started. That is all well and good. The rest of the 20%, what is actually stopping them from digitization? Cybersecurity, right? And I think we have done an excellent job, right? Look at the news, the blog posts, whatever you have it. We have done an excellent job telling the public how dangerous the whole world is, how practically dangerous. We look at this, they got breached, right? The healthcare records, I think were mentioned earlier. And by the way, I'm one of those victims that lost the healthcare record back in 2018. Yep. So I think that is all very real. But what is not very reassuring is that how can SMEs, like the rest of the big boys, keep a good security posture? What is good enough? What's good enough for them, and where are those critical components that they should have first? It's all about priority. In life, it's all about priority. Now, SME-wise, I've been in the SME as well, and I think I have friends in SMEs, and typically kind of like don't quote me, it's not an official survey, it's a private survey. They are at two spectrum of things. Spectrum number one is that they use whatever cybersecurity tools given to them as part of their purchase. You buy a notebook, you got a 3 months free antivirus, you continue using it. You buy you subscribe to a line, right, from one of the telcos that comes with a CPE router, all right, that comes including with the firewall. You use it at the same time as well, but that's about it. All right, so I think these are the bare minimum. The other side of the SMEs, I have friends who are more technical savvy, all right? And being technical savvy, that means they are their own bosses, all right? They know what to do with it, but there will come a time that they realize they are the bosses. The goal for the company is to stay profitable, but not to be a security operations company, right? So I think that is still a fact of life. And this group of people, they will actually buy their own stuff. All right, today they have the switch. All right, I'm going to buy a Cisco switch, and tomorrow I'm going to buy maybe a Aruba firewall, so on and so forth. They act on the stack, and it comes a time that it doesn't look any different if we look back 20 years ago. That's exactly how people does things. Right, you have a hop by hop, right? You take care of it, and they kind of, and we goes back to ask the question. We are only taking care of the networking stuff. We have not even talked about security yet. And we talk about security, what security can we implement at the same time? So I think that is something really crucial. SMEs, the practical part is to make business work, but the practical part is how do you operationalize the whole thing and be sustainable, right? So there's a lot of self-fact-finding and what does the SME as a company do you want to invest in for the long term? Right. Simplicity, in fact, it is kind of a long forgotten word because I think marketeers has made it a little bit too simple. And what is also another fact is that many companies, security vendor companies, right, use simplicity as a buzzword, right? But when you say simple, there's always something that you have to give out, right? What is the something that you have to sacrifice, right? If you are a cybersecurity company, then what does cybersecurity actually means to you? Does it mean about telling you I have a port 8081, all right, I'm supposed to block it, right? That level of lingo are not the lingo that business user understands, right? But if I tell the company, you are not supposed to use Zoom, right? That is the lingo that people understand. Application lingos are more closely related to SMEs, to business owners, to business users, right? But not port 8080, but not TCP port 80, right? So these are things that I think we do have to move away. And after 20, 30 years in this industry, cybersecurity has already become application aware. This is the lingo now, and we use this lingo to build business policies, right? We no longer use TCP, UDP, and all that to build business policies because it just does not make sense. And right now we talk about users. We talk about users, how the user A goes to application A, right? So I think these are the policies that we want cybersecurity to be able to be more easily definable for the business users. So I've quoted Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, and I think this is something I'm not an Apple user, all right, for iPhone, all right, until about 12 months ago, right? I'm always an Android guy, right? When I'm an Android guy, why am I an Android guy? Because I like the flexibility. I like to have all the different kind of applications that the Android App Store will have for me, right? But it comes with one thing. At the end, am I really making use of all those applications, right? Answer is no. Okay, but I like to play around with things. So having my first iPhone, although I'm a Mac user for a long time, having my first iPhone actually does give me that rethought, that rethink. Am I complicating myself? Right? I was an engineer, right? So I must be pretty smart, right? But is it the kind of day-to-day stuff I want to keep on taking care of things, right? So I think coming back to this is, as a company, the motivation for company is to make business work, right? To make your business work. And do you want to get yourself involved in so many things? And remember, I think there's a term called best of breed. I think, as a engineer, sales, marketer, I've been using it for the past 30 years. Best of breed is a good word, but best of breed alone, right? It does not mean anything anymore, right? Because it's a standalone. I think the speaker before me, I think he mentioned about platform, right? We need the thing to work together with the rest and not as a silo, as an isolated solution. That's not going to work too well for all of us. So the simplicity thing is moving on to the big trends. The big trend that we all know about, right? Work from anywhere, right? Home, office, right? A cafe, and so on and so forth. And we also know that I think these are where it's part of digitization that the companies, large or small, pushes to evolve. And once they evolve over there, and I think we can all kind of agree, right? During the March of year 2000, everybody is trying to rush. Everybody is trying to rush to buy more SSL VPN capacity or new box. Everybody is trying to do that. So the cybersecurity market for those few vendors are actually having an excellent time, right? But during those times, I think what has actually been left out is actually the consideration of security, right? I can almost vouch for it. 7 out of 10 people that I know kind of say, oh, that they'll use whatever comes with it, all right? I think we have mentioned enough today. I'm not going to talk too much about it. The second factor authentication. All right, I think those are excellent things that you just put in. It's going to solve not all the problems, but a very good chunk of the problems is going to go away, right? And with this, that is where the attacks start coming in. And because of time, everybody is rushing for time. That is where technical debt is actually incurred, right? Technical debt means one fine day you are going to return it, right? You have everything, connectivity is done, but you take time to reflect how much debt have you incurred, right? That, by the general terms, is never a positive thing, right? So that is where that you probably can find your network has actually been having somebody else in your network without you knowing about it. And are we supported by the number of right people? Obviously, we know worldwide problem, all right? You can just look at the industry, how difficult it is to hire a cybersecurity guy, right? It's not only Singapore, it's not only Hong Kong, the whole world, right? So the people factor is there, and add on that the IT guy, you want him to double up as a cyber guy, and from a cyber guy's perspective, you give him 10 tools, all right? Make it work, right? I think that you know it's going to be the next HR job posting in about another 6 months, right? So I think that is the kind of problem I think generally the industry is looking at. And if we put it into things in a little bit more perspective, all right? This is how Fortinet look at things, especially true for the SMEs. I'm not talking about the latest and greatest things, but I think these are the practical pillars, if I may, right? First, we have to consider where are the users and where are the devices. How do we secure the users? How do we secure the devices, right? Are we supposed to treat a user that is in the office differently when the user is actually at home? Do we have to do that, all right? It could be right, it could be wrong, but I think I'll come to the part that's also mentioned earlier, the notion of zero trust. Networks, we talk about ages, right? Last time, very simple, right? You go to the office, you're protected by the firewall, case closed. People start to go home, people start to move elsewhere, work around the globe. That's where all this becomes a little bit more complicated. You go home, you have your simple router, which is not going to do much for you. 5G, right? You have a pop-up store, right? SMEs, I think you need the flexibility to quickly turn up a pop-up store, that you have your charging stations, right? Your POS, so on and so forth, right? And once you put all that, are you going to, I will take another example, it's easier for me. If you are a doctor, all right, if you are running your own private practice, are you going to allow your public Wi-Fi in the same network as your medical station? Are you going to allow the public Wi-Fi in the same network as your point of sales machine? Right? Chances is that it's not. Right? You need to do segregation. How are you going to segregate this kind of network automatically by using a off-the-shelf router that you buy from, let's say, one of the electrical stores? Right? You can't. Right? And these are some of those basic, fundamental best practices, segregation, all right, across multiple segments that you actually will need. Then applications. Applications, we know cloud applications. Everybody has, during the past 24 months, I think a good chunk of it has accidental multi-cloud users. They has not planned to go multi-cloud, yeah, they don't want to go a single cloud, right? But because of the pandemic, everything, again, a big rush. Everybody has accidentally stepped on, tried on, and adopted a multi-cloud approach. But what they didn't actually quite realize, that actually become another attack vector. Right? So that is the fact of life. The more you rush, the more you react to the situation. There are certain things that you just have to put by the side. But I think it's time to kind of come back to consider about it. The last pillar is something about operations. We know about network operations, and this is about security operations. Right? We know about this, and personally, this is one of the things I dreaded most. Right? And this is for any operations guys here, thank you very much, because this is the hard job. This is the hard job to continue making the network work. This is the hard job of upgrading device A and device B will not break. right? These are the hard work, and it has to be done in a continuous fashion. Now, we also did a survey, but this is in US. We did a survey to see what is the most frustrating things the operations people actually has, right? I'm just taking the numbers for the 150 to 500, right? The bigger numbers, let's put it aside because it's the most matching to our concept of SME here in Singapore, right? Lack of understanding of how to best use the features, right? If I'm going to give you one tool, yeah, you might spend time to actually do it. How about I give you 5? How about I give you 10? Right? So the number of tools given will not allow a very lean manpower to do very much of it. Troubleshooting issues, yeah. So this is number one. This is also the issue why I don't think I will be a very good support guy. All right, I'm a little bit short of patience, right? When I troubleshoot, hey, after there's 10 devices down the road, all right? And it's just not an easy job, right? It requires a lot of attention and a lot of details, all right? So this is never easy. So not something that people, it's easy to do, especially the more products that you have, the more troubleshooting that you're going to have as well. Maintaining configuration, right? For example, right now, so remember the accidental multi-cloud scenario. You are using AWS, right? How sure can you have a matching firewall policy on your AWS compared to what you have on your local firewall? And what's worse, you started to use Azure, right? Or some other cloud which the price is going to be cheaper. How do you have matching policies, right? It is almost, I would say impossible, it's almost impossible. There are always other solutions for you to go around doing it. But trying to maintain that kind of consistency is important because there isn't, you can't, when something goes wrong, you can't give the reason or excuse to the customers, oh, actually because this guy can't do this. So that's why I do without it. It's simply not a good way to respond to the public. And the very last thing I want to kind of like wrap this up is that challenges stemming from complexity aren't an issue. That means it's not a problem. Complexity is not a problem. Look at the numbers. I think this is the only low numbers. That means the majority of them, for the fact that technology is complex, operating the technology actually is more complex, right? So I think this is the part, my point to drive this is that simplify, all right? It is not a simple route, right? But this is something from the management to push down to kind of like move away from the very engineer route, but to have something more holistic. I think that's the only way that SME can grow and secure at the same time. So a better approach is what we articulate, is to maximize the very limited resources that we have. And how do we do it? One of the key things is about consolidation. Consolidation will come in different aspects, right? What Fortinet actually proposes is that let's come together, we come to the same platform. If you can't, let's have fewer platforms in the environment rather than having 20, 30, 40 tools, right? Bring the tools together, right? Form up a platform that you can more easily integrate and you can more easily monitor, right? So these are the management part of things. And after that is that how do we know we work? How do we know the solution actually is good enough for the market? That is where I think rely on third-party reports. Right? I think we have many of it in the industry. These are third-party reports that does an unbiased test. Right? One of the more famous ones, if you guys follow, is the MITRE ATT&CK test. Right? So the MITRE test, SE Labs, I think these are all good third-party that is non-affiliated. All right? Let somebody have a fair say to see whether something is good or something is not so good. Right? So I think that is one of the common ways that people in the industry will choose their buying. Maximum value is not only about dollars and cents. Right? The value to me is more about how do you get everything to work. Right? It would be great if I said I buy a vendor A and vendor B. Right? And I know that vendor A and vendor B has proven to work before. Right, under a certain construct, right? So I think these are values, right? For Fortinet, this is why we are also trying from a market perspective to make a more inclusive market. When I say a more inclusive market, that means we do third-party tests. We have over 400 solutions integrated with us today. Right, so starting part is on secure networking. The question is this: whatever we do, I think the question that we need to ask is that how easily can this be integrated? Right, it can be from Fortinet products. Fine, I think of course that's the easiest, but it should also be from the broader product angle. Right, there are certain things, right, that you need to use because it haven't been expired. It's something that you love it, right? So make sure that you can actually integrate into the same platform. So unifying WAN, LAN, and security, I think is the very first thing, is an opportunity for SMEs to consider, right? Having 3 boxes versus having 1 box. Which one is easier for you to manage? I think the answer is obvious. And because you can unify the WAN, the LAN, and the security together, right? That means the LAN, including the Wi-Fi, that's when you can build business policies, right? We say user A to application A, you have these security policies, and at the same time, user A to application A, you have this set of SLA, right? In other words, for engineers, also AKA QoS, right? The kind of guarantees. And because everything now is smaller, is more compact together, that's why you can manage them using a single console. It's possible, right? I think that is one of the ways to think about, to kind of like rethink about how the last 20, 25, 30 years, the LAN and the WAN has been working, right? And then kind of like try a newer method, right? I think the world has changed, right? For the past 2 decades. Things is a lot more manageable today. Okay, so instead of a port by port kind of configuration, you go to the left, configure this stuff, this self configuration, move to B, move to C, and any one of them breaks, the user experience breaks. Right? I think it's as simple as that. You must make sure there's comparable configuration among all components in the entire chain. Right? So this is what we think it should look like: user, device, application. Your policies should be talking about user, device, application, rather than port numbers. And on top of it, security should be front and center. Right? It shouldn't be, oh, because I only have a layer 2 switch, I can't implement security. That doesn't sound too right anymore in today's context. And how about SD-WAN? SD-WAN, one of the basic functionality of SD-WAN is about resiliency. Right? You get 2 lines, and obviously you either want to load balance it, right, to get a higher throughput, or you want to make sure that applications automatically get rerouted to the other line when the first line actually fails. Right? So either way, and all these things today is already possible in the solution set today. Right? A little bit of animation. So this is what I'm saying. There's a lot more advanced features in the next gen firewalls we're talking about today. Right? There's things like IPS. There's things like it's not only web filter, it's SWG. Right? So all these things today, you can already find it being rolled up into a single solution. Right? So especially for SMEs, right? SMEs have the has a little bit more leeway to change, right? You don't have a multiple tiers of agreement with the bosses, right? With the CFO, with the CEO and the CIO, right? So there is more leeway for you to exercise the change, and the returns is reducing whatever errors, right? It's not going to eliminate, okay, but it's going to reduce the errors because you have fewer devices for you to configure, right? Another point of value, right? I think you will have heard about threat intel. Threat intel is great. Threat intel is about a certain group of people, the analysts, the researchers that actually spend time to research on threats all over the world. Right? So this, for Fortinet, they are our FortiGuard labs. So they are the one that does all this. But having threat intel itself is actually quite pointless. Right? What if I tell you, oh, there's a new application, right, that's vulnerable? What are you going to do with it? right? Threat intels will only be really, really useful if you can feed it back into the solutions that you're already using, right? It's just like antivirus software, right? You have a new update, right? They give you the update file without them updating it, right? So you are the one who's going to take this update file and try to feed it back to all your endpoints, right? Not very useful, right? So all these antivirus signature files are all updated automatically, right? So this is where we do it. We can't use the AI engine directly at your endpoint at your office, but we use a lot of AI and ML back in the lab. That's the only way that we can catch up with the attackers. Okay, second part is the endpoint hygiene. I think EDR is one of those things if you want to have advanced endpoints, right? Security-minded is about training. I think we have talked about today, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I just want to remind everybody again, users ourselves are actually the first line of defense. Visibility, if we can't see it, we can't protect it. If we can't see it, we also cannot protect against it, right? Do you even know that your smart fridge is actually talking to your database server? Right? We wouldn't know, right? So, but if we know that there's a smart fridge alone, a smart fridge in the environment, we can segment it into its own individualized segment, right? I think that's how important segmentation is to segregate the network. So I've talked about endpoint security, and I think one of the things, coming back to the angle of 2FA, right, this is part of it. How do you actually secure your remote access? 2FA, MFA is a very, very good mechanism to employ. Right? So don't want to talk too much about it, but again, I agree to the speakers before me. Password is not sufficient. Right? Password, in fact, to me, I will even say, I'm so glad that we are inching forward. Not too long later, hopefully, that we can get rid of all the passwords. Right? It is not a very useful mechanism for me. Right? I can hardly get my wife to change a password. Right? So I think that's how bad it is. And zero trust is a concept, right? It's a philosophy, in fact. So having zero trust, I think we extend the level. It's not just authentication. It's not just authentication the user, whether you get him or her into the network. But let's extend it. Is this user allowed to access application A? Is this user allowed to access application B but not A? I think all these advanced policies can now be mapped in, and all these are part of an integrated solution from a Fortinet perspective that we tie the endpoint to the firewall. So we know where actually is the enforcement point. Cloud, right? So cloud is one of those things that again, we have accidentally went multi-cloud, and we have accidentally also went siloed multi-cloud. Right? Every cloud itself has their own security feature set. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to kind of consolidate them. One of the easiest way to, from a firewall perspective, is actually to first relook into the firewall. Right? So in the App Store of the cloud, typically you will find a FortiGate there, a VM version there as well. Right? So if you want to have a consistent policy application, whether it's on-premise, whether it's cloud, or whether it's hybrid, having at least the same firewall, I think that's a very good first step. And email security, there's a whole session on email security. I wouldn't go too deep into it, but I just want to mention, I think things like, we know that it's still the largest vector of where the threat comes in. Right? It's still the part that people attempt their phishing attempts, how they actually send across files they are actually infected. Right? It's still there. All right? But what is important is that these attackers have also evolved. They are evolved that we no longer really see the prince, right? Wanted to share his wealth with you, right? Right? And you no longer really see bad English. Right? They bothered, compared to about 4 or 5 years ago, these attackers now, they bothered to at least do a spell check. Right? They bothered to make the whole email looks legit. Right? And they try their best to fool you, which is like Fortinet with a double I. right? So they have evolved, and of course, I think what I'm showing you is already passé already, right? They will keep evolving as technologies evolve, right? There's a lot of smart people around, and it's just too bad for us that they work for the other side of the world. And with that, with email, with users, with the network, all right, we are still talking about individual pillars. The platform I'm talking about is to consolidate them. To consolidate, can your email system, your email security, give you some additional information, right? We call IOCs, right? Indicator of compromise. Can we extract some indicator of compromise information from the emails that's known bad and feed it into the firewall so that the rest of the people can be safe from not going into that particular URL or to that particular IP address? So all these are good things when you start integrating multiple solutions together. Right? So this is about centralized access and control, and it's also about utilizing cloud. Right? Cloud is universal in a way, right? We can access the cloud everywhere. And as administrators, I think administrators right now can also work from home. Right? I think this is important. And to bring one step further, if you have an office that's actually in Malaysia, right? You know, I going to JB right now, you can't even go there. But if you have setting up a new office, how do you also set up the new equipment? Right? There's something called zero touch. It's something I appreciate since about 2015, when I think everything is not new technology, okay, but the engineers have put in multiple technologies together so that it's almost plug and play. Right? You do not need to have the Old Chunky, for example. Old Chunky, right? The people the servers, they will not know anything about how to configure. Right? The most they can do for you is plug in the power, plug in the cable. That's probably as much as you can ask from them. So there's a lot of things has already happened, and I think these are some of the things that we should consolidate, not only for security, but also for efficiency as well. And so last but not least, this is the way how we look at a holistic cybersecurity implementation. All right, we call it the Cybersecurity Fabric. And for those who actually follow Gartner, Gartner came out with something, cybersecurity mesh architecture. Right? Compare them. There are many very similar ideas. Right? The terminologies we may use a little bit differently, but I think by and large the idea is this: to allow a platform that security tool A, B, C, D, and E, they can talk to one another. Right? That is the only way that at the end of the day, we can start automating things. Right? Humans are too slow. Let's face it. Even if you are very experienced guys, humans are too slow to react, but humans are extremely good in telling the difference, those minute difference between situation A and situation B. Right? That is something that machines cannot do it. So it's a complementary way of us working with machines to get into a better cybersecurity posture. All right? So before I leave, thanks for your time. Simplicity, I think, is something that sometimes for me, I'll just say it, sometimes it's ego, right? I want the best, right? But I want a Ferrari, but I can't even change the gear, right? And after that, who's going to do the maintenance of the Ferrari? Right? So I think some of those things, especially for SMEs, I like SMEs a lot because SMEs, their goals are more practical. Right? It's about sustaining business, it's about growing business, right? But we as an industry should come back to say what is good enough for the SME. Yep. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for the sharing.